Okay, this is not ESPN's 30 for 30. However, it is my 98 for 98. The 98 seasons in the history of the New York Football Giants. I'm going to try to get it done in 98 days. Probably not going to get it done in 98 days, but I am trying to get it done before the beginning of the season, which starts September 10th. I should be able to get that done without a problem. We are forging ahead. We're into the late 60s now. Wow. Season 44, 1968 was the 44th season in the history of the New York Giants. 49th season in history of the NFL. Giants started in 1925. NFL started in 1920. The Giants are 5 years younger than the NFL is. 1968 for the Giants, just another kind of ho-hum, make it through the season. 1968, however, for the AFL, NFL was huge, absolutely huge. The Giants, it was just once again, just, yeah. I say, if anything, in all my videos, basically like in the 60s, the Giants drafts were just ungodly, horrible. They were not drafting anybody really worth a hoot. I mean, they had a couple. I mean, they had Homer Jones. They got him in 1963. This would be his second to last season with the Giants. Yeah, I mean, they had a couple guys here and there that they draft, but for the most part, I mean, you need to keep, replenishing. And I mean, especially when you don't have good ball players, And once again, this draft was just ungodly horrible, really, really bad. Their first pick, which we'll go over with when I talk about the draft, went to because they traded it to the Minnesota Vikings because they got Fran Tarkenton, who really helped turn the Giants around, make them into somewhat of a contender. And they were a contender this year until they lost a bunch of their last games and fell out of contention. But anyway, they traded for Fran Tarkenton in 1967. So they gave away 2 first-round picks and 2 additional picks. Well, their one pick this year went to Minnesota, wound up being they wound up taking Ron Yeri, who was a tackle from USC, wound up being a Hall of Famer. So, and he played with the Vikings for I think 14 years. He was a whole so they traded away. The Giants traded away a pick to the Minnesota Vikings. They took Ron Yeri, who was a Hall of Famer, played 14 seasons for the Vikings. He played, I think, one more season. I think was for the Rams in 1982 or whatever. But he was a great player for a long time. So the Giants traded away these 4 draft picks to get Fran Tarkenton. Fran Tarkenton is going to be a future Hall of Fame quarterback, which is great. The problem is they traded all these four picks away for Fran Tarkenton, and he only played 5 seasons for the Giants, and they traded him back to the Minnesota Vikings. So I mean, it's just one like mistake after the other and they just never replenished. And sometimes you almost kind of, if you start looking at some of the drafts that they had, I mean, you just kind of even won this year, 1968, they were 7-7. And you come and kind of scratch your head, and you look at the roster too, and you really, honest to goodness, you look at the roster, and it's like, who the heck is on this team? I mean, they were 7-7, 7-7. So let's get crack-a-lack in here. But I'm going to go over the draft more and why this was such a huge season in the history of the AFL/NFL. But let's get crack-a-lack in here. The 1968 New York Giants was the franchise 44th season in the National Football League. For the 1968 season, the Giants traded divisions with the New Orleans Saints, with the Giants moving to the Century Division, from the Century Division to the Capital Division. I'll go over this as soon as I'm done here. The Giants finished with a 7-7 record, which placed them second in the Capital Division, 5 games behind the Dallas Cowboys. Giants did not have a first-round selection in the 1968 draft. Their first pick was Rich Buzzin, taken in the second round with the 41st overall pick. New York began the season with a 4-game winning streak. After a 4-game stretch in which they had 3 losses, the Giants went to Dallas and posted an upset victory 27-21. With that win and a victory against the Philadelphia Eagles the following week, the Giants moved into contention for the Capital Division Championship. However, they lost their final 4 games of the season. They were 7-3 at one point. I believe just 1 game behind the Cowboys. Because the Cowboys wound up 12-2, I think it was, or 11-3. The Cowboys were very good this year. Let's see here. However, they lost the final 4 games of the season. The 1968 regular season was Alijah Sherman's the Giants coach. Alijah Sherman's his last season as a head coach for the Giants. He was fired after the preseason I believe it was during the preseason of 1969 after they got beat by the Jets 37-14. But that's next season. But this Alijah Sherman was the coach of the Giants. This would be his final full season as head coach. Now, where are we at here? This is it. Boom. Here we go. Starting in 1967. Up to 1966, shall we say, there was like 2 conferences. It was like the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. Just big conferences with they wound up being a bunch of teams. There was eight teams in each conference. So in 1967, they instead of having just 2 big conferences in each conference, they had 2 divisions in each conference. So in the Eastern Conference, where the Giants are at, there was the Capital and the Century divisions. All these divisions, they all started with C. So from 1967, 68, and 69, there was 4 divisions altogether, all started with C. So in 1970, there was the AFL-NFL merger. That's when they went back to the NFC East, the NFC North, right? The way it is now. But in 67, 68, and 69, it was the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference, and each one had 2 divisions in it. So the Giants were in the Eastern Conference. They were in the Century Division in 1967. They moved to the Capital Division in 1968. And that's basically, the Capital Division almost kind of, if so facto, turned into kind of like the NFC East, because in the NFC, the Eastern, the Capital Division was the Cowboys, the Giants, the Redskins, and the Eagles. 1970, when the AFL and the NFL merged, they came up with the NFC East, and the Cardinals were in there too. So they had 5 teams then. But right now, there was in 67, 68, and 69, there was the Eastern Conference, Western Conference. In the East Conference, there was 2 divisions. So in the Western Conference, there was the Coastal Division, which had the Colts, the Rams, the 49ers, and the Falcons. And then there was the Western Conference. There was also the Central, which was the Minnesota Vikings, the Bears, the Packers, and the Lions. In the Century Division of the Eastern Conference was the Browns, the Cardinals, the Saints, and the Steelers. So, let's see, the Giants, what did they do? In preseason, let's see, this would also be the final season where the Giants strictly played preseason games against NFL teams. Starting in 1969, the Giants would start entertaining AFL teams, meaning 1969 is when they started their series against the New York Jets. And then moving forward, I know, and they started, well, you can check us out right here. Let's see what they got next season. It was just the Jets in 69? Yeah, just the Jets in 1969. But then 1970, let's see, 1970, the Steelers went to the AFC, right? And I know the Giants played the Jets, and then they played the Steelers. And they played the Chargers also as well. So, that's when that's when they started playing against some AFL teams. 1971, the Giants played the Oilers. They played the Patriots. They played the Jets. All these were all preseason games. So this was the last season, 1968, where the Giants played strictly teams from the NFL in the preseason. They had 4 preseason games. The first one was they played the Packers in Green Bay. They won 15-14. Then they played the Atlanta Falcons at a neutral site. They played them in Nashville, Tennessee, and they beat the Falcons 17-13. The following week in the Yale Bowl, in New Haven, Connecticut, the Giants played the St. Louis Cardinals and lost 18-10. And then the final preseason game, the Giants pretty much every year used to play the Philadelphia Eagles back in the 60s. Every year played the Philadelphia Eagles. So they played them in Palmer Stadium, which is in Princeton, New Jersey. So the Giants played the Philadelphia Eagles for the final preseason exhibition game of the 1968 season, and they lost 21-7. So they were 2-2 in their exhibition or preseason games. Let's see here. The 1968 NFL season. The 1968 NFL season was the 49th regular season in the history of the National Football League. Per agreement made during the 1967 realignment, New Orleans Saints and the New York Giants switched divisions. The Saints joined the Century Division while the Giants became part of the Capital Division. The season ended with the Baltimore Colts defeated the Cleveland Browns. It was a horrible championship game, 34-0. Just a horrible game. And then why this was such a special season was because the Baltimore Colts had one loss. They were favored by anywhere from 18 to 21 points in the Super Bowl against the New York Jets. Joe Namath guaranteed a victory. The Jets came through 16-7. So in Super Bowl III, the AFL defeated the NFL for their first Super Bowl victory. The Packers won the first 2 Super Bowls. They beat the Chiefs 35-10. Super Bowl I, they beat the Oakland Raiders 33-14. Super Bowl II. So Super Bowl III, the AFL were kind of jonesing for a victory, and the New York Jets came through with the Jets' first and only Super Bowl victory and only Super Bowl appearance. They've only had one, so but they won 16-7. Let's see here. And it said also, this is kind of funny because it said subsequently, it was the first time in the history of professional football in which the NFL champion was not crowned as the world champion. Interesting. 1 year later, the feat would be repeated when the Kansas City Chiefs would defeat the Minnesota Vikings 23-7 in Super Bowl IV. The draft, 1968 NFL draft, for the first time that both leagues conducted a combined common draft, was held January 30th to 31st in 1968 at New York's Belmont Plaza Hotel. With the first pick, the Minnesota Vikings selected offensive tackle Ron Yary from the University of Southern California. Hall of Famer. Division races. The Eastern Conference was split in the Capital and Century Division, and the Western Conference had the Coastal and Central Divisions. In part, in the past, 2 teams were tied for the division lead at the season's end. A 1-game playoff was conducted to break the tie. Starting in 1967, a tie-breaking system was implemented that stated that with net points in head-to-head competition, followed by the team that had less recently played in a title game. As such, only one team in a division would be the division winner, even if the won-loss record was the same. Let's see here. The Central, let's see what the Giants were at. The Giants were in competition, but they were 7-3 at one point, and the Cowboys, I believe, were 8-2. The Giants were 1 game out with 4 games to go. They lost their final 4 games. So, let's see. Cleveland pretty much walked away with Cleveland. Let's see here. Cleveland went up. They were 10-4. The St. Louis Cardinals were 9-4-1. So the St. Louis Cardinals were right there. So St. Louis Cardinals, they tied the Pittsburgh Steelers. Actually, they tied the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were very bad. The Steelers. Let's see here. The Steelers wound up 2-11-1. The Cardinals at home tied the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Cardinals were 9-4-1. The Steelers were 2-11-1. And the Cardinals at home tied the Steelers. Had the Cardinals beaten the Steelers, the Cardinals would have wound up 10-4-1. and they would have tied with the Browns, who were 10-4-1. I'm not exactly sure who would have wound up winning the tiebreaker there, but it was a close race. Let's see here. In the Western Conference, the Minnesota Vikings won their first. They went to their first playoffs. They won with a record of 8-6. The Bears were 7-7. They were basically tied going into the final week of the season. The Bears lost to the Packers 28-27. So the Bears, their record, they fell to 7-7. Meanwhile, the Vikings, they won their final game. Let's see, who did they beat? I forgot who it was. They beat the Eagles 24-17. So the Vikings finished with a record of 8-6. The Bears finished with a record of 7-7. So the Vikings wound up winning their division and going to the playoffs. And then the Baltimore Colts and the Los Angeles Rams, they had a nice little battle going on there. But in the end, the Colts wound up with a record of 13-1. And the Rams were very good as well, too. They were 10-3-1. So they were very, very good. It's just the Colts were just only had one loss. So the Colts were like pretty much the best team in football. The Colts scored 402 points in 14 games. They gave up 144 points in 14 games. Basically, they gave up 10 points a game. I mean, that's ridiculously low. That's unbelievably low. That's why they were such a big favorite in the Super Bowl over the Jets. So in the playoffs, the Browns played the Cowboys in the playoffs. The Browns would prevail 31-20. The Colts and the Vikings played each other in the playoffs, and the Colts would win 24-14. So in the NFL championship game, you had the Baltimore Colts go to Cleveland to play the Browns. And it just kind of goes to show you how things were just weird, because you know how it is nowadays. If you have like the best record and the championship game goes to you, you know, if the Giants were 16-1 and they were playing the Philadelphia Eagles in the championship game, and the Eagles are like 12-5 and the Giants are 16-1, the Giants have the home field advantage in the championship game. You earned that. Well, that's not the way it was back then. Back then, the Eastern Conference, I believe what was in 1968, they had the rights to the home field advantage, because the Cleveland Browns went to the championship game. They were 10-4. The Baltimore Colts were 13-1. So under normal circumstances nowadays, the Baltimore Colts would have the home field advantage. Well, no, they played the championship game. They played it in Cleveland, but it didn't matter. The Colts wound up winning 34-0. They just romped all over them. It was a horrible, horrible championship game. Most valuable player went to Earl Morrall, the quarterback of the Baltimore Colts, who helped guide them to their 13-1 because Johnny Unitas got hurt. Now, of course, Earl Morrall was the quarterback for the Giants from 1965 to 1967. Well, he was 67. He was like the backup to Frank Tarkenton, but he was a good enough quarterback to take a team to the Super Bowl. But you had to surround them with enough quality talent, which the Baltimore Colts had. The Giants did not have. He couldn't do it all on his own, but he was a good enough quarterback to take a team to a Super Bowl if you had good enough talent around him. As I said, once again, which the Giants did not have. Coach of the year went to Don Shula of the Colts because they were 13-1. Offensive rookie of the year was Earl McCullough, a wide receiver from Detroit. The defensive rookie of the year was Claude Humphrey, the defensive end from Atlanta. Let's see here. Was there... Okay, no major rule changes at all or anything like that. Let's go to the draft. Now, let's kind of show you how just absolute garbage. The Giants traded away their first-round pick. So they did not have a first-round pick. They traded that away to Minnesota. I don't think did the Giants have a second round. Oh, the Giants had a second-round pick. They took Rich Buzzin, a tackle from Penn State. Now he played 3 seasons for the Giants. He was an offensive tackle. He played 3 seasons for the Giants. Their second-round pick. I mean, it's even when guys are drafted and they do wind up playing for the Giants, they don't play very long for him. He played 3 seasons for the New York Giants. Round 3, there were 17 rounds in the draft. let's see, round 3. Let's see, the Giants have a pick. They took Bobby Juhan. Okay, he was at, I think he was till 1971. Was that true? 72. Okay, he played 68 to 72. He was never any type of super duper back. I mean, he played. He played in 44 games. He was a running back. So in 5 seasons, he had a grand total of 840 yards rushing in 5 seasons. He had 4 touchdowns. Once again, yeah, I don't want to call him garbage. I don't want to call Buzzin garbage, but not good quality players to build a team around. You draft somebody, as a running back, and in 5 years he gets you 800. He basically gets what, 150, 175 yards a season rushing the ball. He averages 1 touchdown a year. I mean, you can't build a football team that way. And that's what the Giants kept doing. And that was their 3rd round pick. Let's see, round 4. What we got here? The Giants. I know because they're rounds, but they didn't have a round 4. They didn't have a pick in round 4. How about round 5? Didn't have a pick in round 5. Round 5. Nope. Giants didn't have a pick in round 5 either. I mean, also that too. How are you supposed to replenish your team, which is not very good, very mediocre, if you don't have any draft picks either? So either they don't have draft picks, or the picks that they do have are just not very good. Round 6, they don't have a pick in round 6 either. It's just round 7. Round 7, they took Doug Chapman, a defensive end from Jackson State. Trash, absolute trash. Round 8. Let's see, did the Giants have a pick? See, the Jets have 1, 2. The Jets had 3 picks in this round. Jeez. Nope, Giants didn't have a pick in this round either. See, they traded away all their picks to get players. And obviously the players that they were getting just weren't very good either. All right, round 9, they took Joe Kuntz, a wide receiver from Cal State Fullerton. I'm dying to. I mean, oh my God, he played 1 season for the Giants, and that was it. And then the next year, he played for the Long Island Bulls in 1969. Then his season was over. It was over. He played in all 14 games, and he had 1 kick return. He also played in the ACFL Long Island Bulls in 1969, and that was it. I mean, just garbage, absolute garbage. Round 10, I was just going to do round 10 rounds. This is just too painful. And actually, I didn't even have to do this round because, once again, the Giants don't have any picks. And then undrafted free agents, every now and then, like they had Willie Young as an undrafted free agent. They took Bob Lertzema, who's an undrafted free agent, who wound up being a very good pick for the Giants, but they didn't have any notable undrafted players. There was other ones, but the Giants didn't have any. I mean, this draft was just absolute garbage. The 1967 draft was garbage. 1968 draft was garbage. Absolute garbage. That's, it's amazing they were winning any games at all. They were 7-7. Just unbelievable. Just painful. To look at these drafts that they had. All right. So let's see. So the Giants, let's go through there. I mean, Fran Tarkenton took a little step back this year. He threw 21 touchdowns, was it? Yeah. 1967, the Giants traded for Fran Tarkenton. His first season with the Giants, he threw 29 touchdowns. I think it was 12 interceptions. This year, he had 21 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. So he threw 8 less touchdown passes. He threw for like about 500 or 600. I think he had 3,300 yards passing. 1967. This year, he had 2,700 yards passing. Just took a step back. Let's see here. Their rushing was, they ran the ball for 135 yards a game, which was very respectable. All right. So, they were able to put up some points. They scored, what did they get? 13 rushing touchdowns, and they had 21 passing touchdowns. So, they scored some points. Pete Gogolak, their field goal kicker, kicked some field goals, and they scored some points, but unfortunately, because their defense was just very, very mediocre at best. They gave up a bunch of points, and you give up a bunch, you score a bunch, you win a bunch, you lose a bunch. That's basically the way it was, and they ended up 7-7. They were 7-3, but because just the law of averages just caught up with them because they were a very mediocre team, and they wound up 7-7. I mean, they were nowhere near as good as the Cowboys were in their division. Let's see. Tucker Fredrickson led the team with 486 yards rushing. He had 1 touchdown. I mean, they had a bunch of guys that, Bobby Duhan had 362 yards rushing. Ernie Coy, one of the baby bulls, had 394 yards rushing. Fran Tarkenton has 301 yards rushing. Ronnie Bly had 243 yards rushing. I mean, just a bunch of mediocre players rushing for a mediocre amount of yards. The one thing was Fran Tarkenton and Homer Jones went back. They went the Pro Bowl back-to-back seasons. Fran Tarkenton went, and Homer Jones once again went. Homer Jones had 45 receptions for 1,057 yards. He averaged 23.5 yards a reception, and he had 7 touchdowns. Unfortunately, this would be his last really good season because in 1969, with Homer Jones would be his last season with the Giants. I think he had 1 touchdown reception. And I think his injuries, his knees were catching up with him, and his play just was not as good. So he only had 1 more touchdown with the Giants, but 67 and 68 were very special seasons for Fran Tarkenton and Homer Jones. Let's see. The Giants also had Spider Lockhart went to the Pro Bowl as well. He had 8 interceptions. The thing we kind of scratched my head about is Willie Williams, our cornerback, had 10 interceptions. 10 didn't make a Pro Bowl. I don't understand that one. But the Giants overall, I mean, their defense had 26 interceptions as a team, But I mean, their defense was just, very, very mediocre at best. I mean, what was it? They scored 21 points a game. They gave up 23 points a game. So let's see what we got here. So the Giants started off here this season. They started off 4-0. Things were really looking good. Once again, they always started their first couple games on the road because they shared the stadium, Yankee Stadium, with the Yankees. So I'm believing, every year they always started, except for 1961, I think it was. But every year they always started with anywhere from their first 2 to their first 4 games were on the road. I guess they wanted to make sure that this baseball season was over with and the World Series was over and all whatever. I guess before the Giants went into the stadium and started chewing up the turf. So the Giants' first game was Sunday, September 15th on the road in Pittsburgh. They won 34-20. Then next week, they were on the road Sunday, September 22nd in Philadelphia, and they beat the Eagles 34-25. So now the Giants are 2-0. Their first home game was Sunday, September 29th at home. They played the Redskins. They won 48-21. So you notice they're scoring some points, but they're also giving up some points too. So now the Giants are 3-0. Then they would play the New Orleans Saints at home. They would win 38-21. Now the Giants are 4-0. I mean, but then this is just, then they want to play in the expansion team, the Atlanta Falcons, who were an expansion team in 1966. So, the Falcons were not a dynamic team in 1968. They played in Atlanta, and they lost 24-21. This one was kind of a little bit of a killer because the Giants had the ball. They were driving for at least, there was like about a minute or so to go in the game. They were really in field. They were around like the 25-yard line or so, I believe, if I remember correctly, of the Atlanta Falcons. It within field goal range, but they still had the ball. They were still moving and all that, and they had possibility to score maybe a touchdown. Well, Fran Tarkenton scrambled out to his left, and he's like, looking for somebody to pass the ball to. Well, I don't remember who he tried to throw the ball to, but there was Fran Tarkenton, and then there was a Giants receiver. Well, in between the two was I can't remember the Atlanta Falcons defender. Let me see if I can look it up in the box. All right, never mind. Was Atlanta Falcons defender. Fran Tarkenton tried to throw the ball over the defender to the receiver. Well, he didn't throw it high enough. The Atlanta Falcon defender jumped up, intercepted the pass. The game was over. So the Giants were in field goal range to at least tie the game. If not, Fran Tarkenton scrambled, ran out of bounds or whatever, or threw a better pass or just threw the ball into the ground or whatever, the Giants still might have wound up winning the game. But he threw an interception down by 3 points in Atlanta's territory where they could at least kick the field goal. And they wound up losing 24-21. So that was a tough loss. Then the next week, the 49ers would come to town. The Giants would lose at home to the 49ers on Sunday, October 20th. They would lose 26-10. Now the Giants are 4-2. Giants would rebound the next week, Sunday, October 27th. In Washington, they would win a tough one, 13-10. Now the Giants are 5-2. They're still hanging tough with the Dallas Cowboys. Then the following week, the Colts would come to town, and the Colts were the best team in the NFL. And the Colts would win 26-0. I mean, shut the Giants out. Now the Giants are 5-3. But the Giants would rebound to win their next 2 games on Sunday, November 10th, on the road in Dallas. They would upset the Dallas Cowboys 27-21. Now the Giants are 6-3. I believe the Cowboys at that time were 7-2. So the Giants the following week at home played on Sunday, November 17th at home against the Eagles. They won 7-6. So now the Giants are still 7-3. So the Giants are 7-3. The Dallas Cowboys are 8-2. So the Giants, with 4 games left, the Giants are 1 game out. Anything can happen. Well, unfortunately, the Giants went to Los Angeles, and on Sunday, November 24th, they played the Los Angeles Rams out in Los Angeles, and they lost 24-21. Now they're 2 games back. The following week, the Giants played Sunday, December 1st in Cleveland. And remember, Cleveland won their division, so they're a very good team, and they got blown out by the Browns 45-10. Now the Giants are 3 games back. They're 3 games back with 2 games left to play. The season's over with. So the Giants wound up losing. They lost the last 2 games. Both the last games were at home. Sunday, December 8th, at home against the St. Louis Cardinals. They lost 28-21. Then the final game of the season, Sunday, December 15th. The Giants will lose to the Dallas Cowboys 28-10 to finish at 7-7. But I mean, you look at it, as I said, I mean, if you look at it overall, all in all, right, the Giants did not have a good team. So for them to be finish 7-7, I mean, was rather remarkable. They did not have a good defense. I mean, they didn't really have anybody on. I mean, maybe in the secondary, like Willie Williams, Spider Lockhart, Okay, but I mean, as far as like anybody on the defensive line, any of the linebackers, mediocre players at best. Nothing special at all. The running backs, nothing special. They had Homer Jones, who was getting up there in age, injuries, but he still had one more spectacular season in him. Fran Tarkenton was in his prime. But other than that, I mean, we had Larson was our center. We had maybe a couple nice offensive. Aaron Thomas, we had a nice tight end, but nothing super spectacular. Nothing compared to some of those other teams like the Cowboys or the Browns or the Colts. Nothing compared to those guys. Very mediocre at best. And you got a mediocre team. You got mediocre results. They were 7-7, which actually, if you look at it, was rather remarkable. And actually, I mean, at one point they were 7-3. So you got to give them, it's pretty remarkable. So then in the championship game, right? So we had the championship game. The Colts would prevail 34-0. The AFL championship game was spectacular. At Shea Stadium, the Jets would wind up winning 27-23. It was a thriller. The Giants, I've got Giants on my brain. Sorry. The Jets would go up 27-23. The Raiders would get the ball. It was windy in Shea Stadium. It was tough to throw the ball and all. So the Raiders got the ball back. There was a couple minutes, 3 minutes or so to go in the game. They started marching down the field. They got down around like the 15-yard line. I have to go back and look in the film and all that. Maybe the 20, somewhere around there, the Jets. I don't remember what down it was, but Darryl LaMonica went back to pass, and he threw a ball out to, how was it, Dixon, their running back, I think. Well, Dixon was kind of like parallel to him, all right? But so LaMonica, when he threw the ball, it went backwards. It was a lateral, and in those days there, I guess I think as the rules changed now, I mean, if it's a lateral, basically you're throwing the ball back. It's like a fumble. You can pick it up and run. I believe right now, Well, back then you couldn't. So what happened was LaMonica threw the ball and it went backwards. I don't know if the wind blew it a little bit backwards or whatever, but it wound up being like a lateral. So it was a live ball. So the Jets, one of the Jet guys picked it up and started running down the field with it. And I'm not sure if he scored or he would have scored or whatever, but the play was called dead where he picked the ball up because you couldn't. I guess it's like a muff punt. You're not allowed to. You can recover a muff punt, but you can't advance a muff punt. So I guess it was kind of the same thing there. Where the Jets picked the ball up at, that's where they got possession of it. So the Raiders were moving with about 2 minutes to go or so, whatever in the game, and they had a chance, and the ball went backwards. The Jets got it, and pretty much they didn't run the clock out. The Raiders got the ball back, but they didn't have enough time to score. So the Jets won a thrilling game, 27-23. Kind of went back and forth, just an unbelievable game. So the Jets wound up prevailing 27-23. What's up, Teddy? 68 Raiders playoffs is not counted as a real game anymore, only because they lost. Yes, they did. They lost. So then we went to the Super Bowl. Joe Namath, he said he like all week long or the weeks leading up to the game or whatever, he was kind of hearing nothing about the Colts and all. And he was I guess a conference or press conference or whatever it was, and some guy is what Namath was saying. Hey, the Colts are going to kick your you know what, and Joe Namath was like, he had like enough of it. Listen to the Colts all the time. He said, hey, I'll tell you what, we're going to win the game. I guarantee it. So he shot his mouth off, but it was a confidence. He felt that his team, they had a good overall team. Just overall, very good offensive line, two Snell and Boozer, two great running backs, two good wide receivers, Maynard, Hall of Fame. Their defense was really solid. So he, confident. He said, I guarantee you we're going to win the game. Well, they went up 16-0. They scored a touchdown to put themselves up 7-0. Then 3 Jim Turner field goals put them up 16-0. And then finally, within the last 5, 6, 7 minutes of the game, 5 minutes or so, the Colts finally scored a touchdown to make it 16-7. But it was a huge upset. As I said, the Colts, because they were 13-1, the NFL had won the first 2 Super Bowls, so everybody and their grandmom thought that the NFL would win this Super Bowl as well, Super Bowl III. So they said, I heard anywhere from like 18 to 21 point favorites the Colts were in the Super Bowl, and they wound up losing by 9 points. It was like one of the biggest upsets in Super Bowl history, whatever you want to call it, football history, whatever, But so the Jets wound up when it was a huge game. And as I said, the following season, the Kansas City Chiefs from the AFL would beat the Minnesota Vikings 23-7 in the Super Bowl. So the parity was on. And then, of course, in 1970, we had the merger going on. So, well, that pretty much wraps up the 1968 season for the Giants. This would be the last season for Allie Sherman to coach. He would coach into the preseason of 1969. But what I can remember, I read after the Giants lost quite convincingly 37-14 in the preseason to the Jets. Wellington Mara kind of had it up to here, and they weren't going to go anywhere really with Allie Sherman. He was not a super spectacular coach. He took them to 3 championship games, 61, 62, 63 in the early 60s, but that was from a team that he inherited. As those guys, they started trading away those players. Those players started getting older and retiring all. They did not replace them, and it was just nothing but a bunch of either bad teams or mediocre teams. And I guess Wellington Mara just kind of had it up to here and just saw that the Giants weren't going to go anywhere with Allie Sherman. And he just, not only because after they lost to the Jets in the preseason game, not only weren't they like the best team in the NFL, they weren't even the best team in New York, and not even close because they got embarrassed. It was preseason. I get it. But, it was embarrassed to lose to the Jets by 23 points in the preseason. So, I said, not only weren't they that good in the NFL, they weren't even the best team in New York. So he had it up to here. Allie Sherman got fired, And they brought in Alex Webster, who used to play for the Giants. Alex Webster was on the Giants coaching staff. He started coaching the Giants. So he was the Giants coach from 1969 and 1973. But so that wraps up the season, the 1968 mediocre team. And you got mediocre results, 7-7. As I said, this is the wilderness years. I wish I can say, well, wait till next year or wait till 1964 to 1980, there's 2 winning seasons, 1970 and 72. 1964 to 1980, no playoffs, 2 winning seasons. So it doesn't really get any better from here, unfortunately. Sorry for bad news. So that wraps up the 68 season of the mediocre 7-7 New York Giants. I'll be back again tomorrow with the 1969 season of the New York Giants, which just happened to be the 45th season in the history of the New York Giants. I'll see you then.